You know, back in 1774, the British Empire thought it had a pretty smart plan. They were going to make an example out of one troublemaking American colony. The idea was simple: punish them, isolate them, and get them back under control. But, well, that punishment ended up doing the exact opposite, and it accidentally lit the fuse for a revolution. So let's dive into this incredible story of some seriously unintended consequences.
And really, this is the question at the heart of it all, isn't it? What happens when a punishment backfires? Because this story, the story of the Intolerable Acts, it's not just about some harsh laws. It's about how a calculated move by a global superpower could go so wrong, so spectacularly wrong, that it literally changed the course of history forever.
All right, so let's set the stage here. The British Parliament was, to put it mildly, furious with Massachusetts, especially after the whole Boston Tea Party fiasco. But their strategy wasn't to punish all 13 colonies. Oh no, their plan was way more targeted than that.
Their goal was really simple: make such a brutal example out of Massachusetts that the other 12 colonies would be too scared to cause any more trouble. The thinking was pretty clear, right? If you cut off the head of the snake, the rest of the body will just fall in line. It was a classic divide and conquer strategy.
So to pull this off, Parliament passed a whole series of new laws. And the colonists, well, they came up with their own name for them: the Intolerable Acts. I mean, that name alone tells you everything you need to know about how they felt. This wasn't just another tax or some new regulation. This was something much, much more serious.
So what did this punishment actually look like? Well, back in Britain, they officially called them the Coercive Acts, and that name, coercive, tells you their exact purpose: to force, to coerce the colony of Massachusetts into submission and bring it to heel.
And let me tell you, this punishment was severe. First, they shut down Boston Harbor, which was the absolute economic lifeblood of the city. And it was going to stay closed until every single bit of that destroyed tea was paid for. Second, and this is maybe even more important, they basically took away the colonists' right to govern themselves. They just dissolved their local assembly. The message couldn't have been clearer: your money and your freedom are now under our direct control.
So Britain sits back, probably feeling pretty pleased with itself, just expecting the other colonies to quietly back away from those troublemakers in Massachusetts. But what happened next was something that absolutely nobody in London saw coming. The punishment didn't create fear, it created empathy.
And this right here, this just shows you how completely the British strategy failed. Just look at it side by side. The goal was to isolate, but the result was to unite. Instead of looking at Massachusetts and thinking, phew, glad that's not us, colonies from Virginia all the way to South Carolina saw a scary reflection of their own future. And this wasn't just a feeling, you know. It led to real action. Other colonies started sending food and supplies to the blockaded city of Boston because they realized, hey, if it can happen to them, it can happen to any one of us.
Now, this newfound unity, it wasn't a quiet thing. It was loud. It was defiant. And it was being shouted from the rooftops by the very leaders Britain had hoped to silence. All of a sudden, you have colonists speaking a brand new language. They're not just thinking of themselves as Virginians or New Yorkers anymore, but as something way, way bigger.
Just listen to this from George Washington, a major figure from Virginia. He says, "The cause of Boston is the cause of us all." He's not saying, that's Boston's problem. No, he's making a huge declaration. An attack on one colony's liberty is an attack on everybody's liberty. That is a massive shift in thinking.
And if Washington's statement was a shift, what Patrick Henry said next was an earthquake. I am not a Virginian, but an American. Just pause and think about that for a second. In a world where your entire identity was tied to your colony, Henry is just erasing those lines. He's literally describing the birth of a new, shared American identity, one that was forged in the fire of this British crackdown.
And finally, we have this fateful line from John Adams, who was right there in Massachusetts. The die is cast. He knew it. He understood that this incredible moment of unity, this powerful, defiant reaction to the Intolerable Acts, it was the point of no return. The colonies had crossed the line, and there was absolutely no going back to the way things were.
So, here's the really crucial takeaway. Britain's attempt to chop the head off the rebellion had instead given it a heart. The Intolerable Acts, which were designed to be the final word in this whole argument, accidentally became the first chapter in a unified war for independence. And in the end, it really all boils down to this one simple, powerful fact. Every law they passed, every ship they turned away from Boston Harbor, every single restriction they placed on self-government, all it did was bind the colonies closer and closer together.
The foundation of a new nation was being laid, not because they planned it, but because they had to.
And that leaves us with this really fascinating question to think about, doesn't it? The story of the Intolerable Acts seems to suggest that sometimes the greatest force for unity isn't some shared goal, it's a shared enemy. It shows that an attempt to divide people can, against all odds, become the very thing that brings them together.